Well, thank you guys so much for sharing. It's always nice to, especially in this time of isolation, I really enjoy just catching up a little bit here. But as we kind of go into it, we're getting into the Three Simple Rules by Bishop Reuben Job. And whenever I start any of these studies, I like to kind of go into a little bit about the author, a little bit about the context. And Reuben Job passed away in just 2015, so we don't really have to go too much into the historical context of the guy. He's, younger than a few of us here. But he was born in Jamestown, North Dakota. And if you're not familiar with North Dakota, that's the cold part, which is all of North Dakota. It's all the same, really. But he was educated in Iowa. He went to Lamar's and then got a degree from Garrett Evangelical, which is now a United Methodist seminary. But he actually started out in the EUB. For a little bit of church history, there were three denominations: the Evangelical United Brethren, some small Lutheran denomination, I forget the name of it, and the Methodist Episcopal Church. 1968, they all came together to be the United Methodist Church. And when they joined, he went from being a North Dakota pastor to a South Dakota district superintendent. I would never. What's that, Annabeth?
Well, that's not quite right, because
Oh, really?
for the EUB church, he was in Nashville heading up their, what is the equivalent of like our upper room.
Okay.
And he was working in Nashville when he came to South Dakota to be district superintendent.
Well, fun. Now, what did you get to know Bishop Job?
I got to know him just after he came to be a DS, and that would have been, let me just think, 77, about 78, 79, somewhere in there.
All right. And did you get in trouble, Empath? Did somebody call the DS on you? Is that how you met him?
No, I was serving a Presbyterian church and a Methodist church. It was a yoke parish, and I decided to become United Methodist. And when I met with the cabinet to make that transfer, Reuben was part of the cabinet. He was a DS, and that's how I met him. And then his wife became a good friend of mine. We got to know each other pretty well at one of the schools of Christian mission back in the day.
That's kind of cool.
Go
ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say some of the other folks in our session here probably knew Reuben or got to meet him and have some thoughts about him.
Oh, I just noticed that Pat came in. Now, Bishop Job actually became our bishop of the Iowa Conference in 1984. I believe he was here from 84 to 92. Did any of you guys have the opportunity to go to any of the annual conferences or get to hear him or see him while he was here?
Yes, I did, Nate. I was a delegate from our church for 6 years in a row. And I don't remember what years those were, but it was while he was the bishop. And I just loved him. And I think he came to our church sometime. Do you remember, Marge?
I'm trying to, but I can't put my finger on it or my mind.
Do you remember him in annual conference?
What's that?
Do you remember him in annual conference when you were a district officer?
Was he still?
Yeah. Well,
that would have been in the 80s. Is that when he was our bishop?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I must have. I never had any personal experience talking to him.
No, I didn't either, but I just appreciate him as the DS.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we were in annual conference.
Yeah, it's. I was having this conversation with Becky, the church secretary, and she talked about how Judy Shields had this encounter with a bishop about Judy's pastor at the time was like in charge of some part of annual conference, and she said, he's like, oh, I need a volunteer to just kind of like, yeah, hold the bishop's hand as he comes down the stairs. And she's like, oh, was he a big guy? Was he a big guy? He was an African American man. And
Yeah.
like I was talking with Judy to figure out which one it was, and I'm like, well, she's like, well, big African American guy. I'm like, well, the last African American bishop we had was Bishop Trimble, and he's not that big. He's just my size. Then I looked at a Judy who like barely comes up to my neck. I'm like, oh, I'm big. That's right. It was probably Bishop Trimble.
Oh,
Judy, did
Well,
you-
Go ahead, man.
let me kind of share just a bit about Reuben that might make the study that you're going to do a little more meaningful, and then I'll opt out so you can get to his book. Reuben grew up on a farm, and he did not go to high school. And I think that as I got to know him, his farming experience, I think, really shaped him. And he was quite close to his father. And he talked about he was home farming, and he felt that he was called to the ministry, and he was a little bit scared to tell his father. And so one night he was milking the cows, and his father came along, and he said to his dad he had something he wanted to say, and his dad said to him, you want to enter the ministry.
mm,
And so then that's when Reuben went to Westmar, and he really lived his faith, and the spiritual disciplines were absolutely essential for him and for his family. He had 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls, and the girls were the oldest. And one of them came to him when she was in high school and said to him, you know, Dad, I don't feel close to God anymore. And Reuben said, you haven't read your Bible and been praying, have you? And she said, no. And so she went back to that, and it showed how important that discipline was to him. And I think that he's a man that really personified the writing that he did. I think when you read his work and he talks about the faith, it's the faith that he knew. He knew his faith in ways that I've never met anyone like that. But I really do believe that it came from the prayer life that he had, that was the center of who he was as a person. One time he gave me a quote, and it's not a scriptural quote, but it's a quote that he gave to me to help me with my self-confidence and who I am. But it really described who he was, and I've tried to live by it. And you might have heard this before, but anyway, I would leave you with this little quote. A friend is one to whom one may pour out the content of one's heart, chaff and grain together, knowing that gentle hands will take it and sift it, keep what is worth keeping, and with the breath of kindness, blow the rest away. And that was Reuben. He would take the best that we had, and he would, with the breath of kindness, blow the rest away. So I know you're going to be blessed by your Bible study and your study of 3 simple rules. He was such a gift to our world, to the church, to his friends, to his church folk. And it's just such a blessing that we have so many of his writings available to study. So God bless you all as you engage in this time of sharing and learning and growing in the faith. Good to see you all, and I hope to get down to there to see you all in church in person before too long. I've had my 2 shots, so we're getting close. So hope to see
You
you.
just have your regular
in
cooties, not the new one.
Florida. Huh?
You just have your regular cooties and not the new cooties then.
Yeah. So anyway, blessings to you all.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for joining us,
Thank
Aunt Beth. Love you.
Love you too.
Bye. Yeah, and I think I've shared before that, again, I think I've met like Bishop Job like once or twice, but Aunt Beth always talks about him and their trips to go see him and stuff like that. And it did not dawn on me that he was such a big deal until I got to the Iowa conference and he was held in just such reverence. But as Aunt Beth said, he was a pretty prolific writer. He served as the world editor of the Upper Room for, I think, over a decade. And in that time, he has over 40 writing credits. The last version of his Daily Life of Prayer that he actually got to edit before he passed away, I picked that up because I've always been very insecure about my prayer life. I have ADHD, so your traditional meditative prayer is very difficult for me. And reading through his books, he's an amazing man. I'll have to. For a second, everybody locked up there. Sorry about that. I meant to ask Aunt Beth. I'll have to ask her and share the answer with you guys. I think it's really fascinating that he began his life and ministry in the EUB church, but he's such a passionate Wesley scholar. He wrote dozens of books on John Wesley. I thought that was pretty cool. So, shall we? We're going to talk about this philosophical dilemma. Told you you're going to like this, Donna. To kind of prime the pump for how we think or how we should think differently about the world that we live in. Have any of you guys ever heard of the trolley problem?
No.
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 So this is like freshman ethics, like 101 kind of ethical dilemma here. You are the person here standing at the lever and a trolley's coming. The track that the trolley's on has 5 people on it. If the trolley goes as it goes without you doing anything, 5 people will die. You have the power to reach out and pull the lever and kill 1 person to save 5 people. What would you do if you were the person at the lever?
Are you asking the question, or are you
I'm
having us
asking
deliberate?
What would any of you like? We'll actually go through and see how everybody would respond. What would each of us do if we were at the lever?
Close my eyes and pray. Panic,
Start.
close my eyes and pray.
Good start.
Well, I can't see that would happen. One track goes this way and the other way. Are they standing on the track?
They're tied down. There's some sort of vaudevillian kind of bad guy with a mustache twirling somewhere who tied all 6 of the tracks.
Oh, so they're not standing up.
Nope. If the trolley goes as it's going to go, 5 people will get run over. If you pull the lever, and you have to pull the lever, you'll kill 1 person rather than allowing 5 people to die.
And that's the guy over there that's by the little thing sticking up.
Yep.
The trolley, it doesn't have a driver in it?
Apparently not. If it does, he can't control where it's going.
I don't know.
Well, as a Christian, you would jump in front of the tracks knowing that you would die and hoping that would knock the train off the track.
Right.
Oh, you're jumping to the last question there. Yeah.
Hmm.
Your hope isn't in this world anyway.
My guess is that if I actually found myself in this situation, I wouldn't think, I would do.
Mhm.
I would do one thing or the other, but I don't think I would stop and think very long.
There's always when the situation becomes real, there's the adrenaline and all, just the presence of the situation that will dominate your mind. There is this fantastic show, I think I've referenced it before, called The Good Place. And this whole metaphysical, nonsensical science fiction comedy show. Have you watched it, Benita?
We have, yep. We're on episode 3 or 4 now. Yes.
Okay, so I won't ruin the big twist for you.
Yeah.
But, at one point in time, Ted Danson's character decides to actually go through and do the trolley experiment and force Chidi to do it. But he's like, let's do that again, but only your grandma's on the tracks, and just this really twisted version of it. But
That was where I was going next, because when I have read or seen something similar to this, it's one thing if you don't know any of the 6 people, or what if you do know some of them in either or both groups, and then it gets like, oh dear.
yep. And again, this is one of those ethical issues too, because the ethics of the situation come down. If you take action, you are directly responsible. So you will kill one person, but you save 5 people. And you're a hero for saving 5 people. Net gain of, 4. However, if you don't do something, if you fail to do something to save people, you are then also ethically at fault. Like, oh, you could have saved these people, but you didn't. And that's what makes this whole situation kind of this whole moral gray area. It's kind of no right or wrong answers, but it's one of those things that's meant to be difficult. So how do we think John Wesley would answer this? So I think it's fascinating that the first general rule of John Wesley, I believe, is also the first part of the Hippocratic Oath. What's the first part of the Hippocratic Oath there, Dr. Dave? Or Bonita?
Bonita lives it more than I do, probably.
I don't know.
Do no harm.
Do no harm. That's where John Wesley stole it. In John Wesley's mentality, proactively doing harm will never lead to a better world. In his mindset, that might be one person there as far as you can see, but there might be 10, 15, 100 people down the track you don't know. That the act of causing harm will always cause more harm. We might not see it, we might not feel it, we might not live it, but if we cause harm, we will never become righteous. Like, causing harm is never a righteous action. So that's how John Wesley kind of looks at that. And that's something that is very different than our current worldview. Because we are very much about proportional responses or preventative strikes. We just did an airstrike in Syria because they were attacking our troops. And by doing that, we are saving so many lives down the road. And again, in the political sphere, that's probably ethical, different discussion. But in John Wesley's mind, causing harm will always cause something worse to happen. So he would just not touch the lever at all. He would do what Benita did. He would close his eyes and pray. And then Jesus, I think Dave probably answered what Jesus did. Throw yourself on the tracks and save everyone. But that's kind of, like I said, the Wesleyan worldview is very different than what we are used to. Western culture is kind of based off of what they call consequentialism, and the critique of consequentialism is it's limited. Consequentialism means the ends justify the means. We make this little sacrifice for a bigger benefit. We tighten our belts here so we can have abundance later on. And we see that in every aspect of our life and of our world. It's just kind of how the world works. The concept of limited consequentialism is that we never know all the consequences of our actions. We never know what our actions will ever fully do. You've probably heard of the butterfly effect, where butterfly flaps its wings on this side of the world, causes a hurricane someplace else. Exaggerated version, but I think in the past I've kind of talked about the whole concept of the cobra effect. You guys remember me talking about the cobra effect? In India, when the United Kingdom was occupying India, they had this huge problem with cobras. So what they did was they put a really hefty bounty on cobras, so the local population would hunt cobras. That was the plan. Made sense, right? Pay them, kill the cobras. Do you guys remember what they ended up doing? They ended up farming cobras. They would farm cobras because that was an easier way of making money. And when they caught them doing that, they stopped the bounty, and then they just released all the cobras around the barracks of the soldiers, so they had a way worse problem. So we can never truly tell if the ends justify the means. So the Christian mindset is you focus on the means. You focus on your actions. You don't focus on the outcomes. You focus on putting one foot in front of the other on the Christian path. This is actually the New Testament reading for today. Does somebody have good eyes and can read that? I sorry, the font on this wasn't the best. Should have picked a different template. The 1 Corinthians verse. Somebody want to read that for me?
I will.
Go ahead.
For the message about the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom, God decided through the foolishness of our proclamation to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs, and Greeks desire wisdom, but we proclaim Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those who are the called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength. I guess that's the end.
Yep. Paul's pretty wordy. That's coming from a guy like me. Who wants to take a guess at what he's saying here?
What he said?
Yeah, like what does all that mean if you had to paraphrase it?
We don't have any answers tonight.
That's part of it, yeah.
And you're wise because of that.
Yep.
Well, the piece that I picked out here, I'm having trouble reading it. He decided to save those who believe, and it wasn't whether it was the wise or what
Mhm.
people were thinking or doing. It was those who believed.
Yeah. Paul is this brilliant writer, and he's making all of these cultural references that his audience would pick up. And since we're not his audience, we don't quite get it. But he's going back to this whole he's basically connecting Jesus to the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs is this book of wisdom, and everything in Proverbs starts out by saying the beginning of wisdom is, it says fear, but reverence is a better translation. The beginning of wisdom is reverence of the Lord and reverence of the law. That you need to put God, revering God, above any wisdom you may get. Because we're going to give you some advice here. It's going to sound awful. It's going to sound ridiculous. It's going to sound counterintuitive. Have faith that God sees beyond your limited consequences and knows that these actions, that these beliefs will guide you to a better life. That's basically what it's saying here. Humans, we're too small. We don't quite get it. God gets it. But since God gets it and we don't, sometimes God's rules, Jesus's actions seem kind of ridiculous. For example, why would you be crucified to get life? Why would you be tortured to death to achieve life? Answer is because it works and we believe it. If you think about that rationally, it's going to make your head hurt. So that's kind of what Paul's getting at here, is that don't listen to the wisdom of this world. Have faith that God's rules, that Jesus's life and ministries, they'll take you on the right path, even if it seems like it won't. I think I have some questions on the next one here. So, I don't. Let's go back. I wrote down some questions to share here, but I thought I put them in the next slide, but I didn't. So you just think of some commandment in the Bible or some story in the Bible that really seems like it wouldn't do you any good. For example, why is it a financially sound idea to tithe? Why would it be to your benefit to give me 10% of your money? That seems like a ridiculous counterintuitive rule, right? Can you think of other rules like that that just seem opposite to what we think in the Bible?
Did you say rules?
Yeah, rules or stories, parables, guidelines. I'll give you one more to kind of prime the pump a little bit. I think this is fantastic. Ash Wednesday is the only Christian holiday that has the same liturgical readings every year. There's usually a 3-year cycle, so every holiday, Christmas included, will go through and have different readings every year. But Ash Wednesday is the only one that has mandated scripture readings for every Ash Wednesday. And the gospel reading is Matthew 6, where he says, "Do not practice your piety in public. Don't pray in public. Don't fast in public. Always practice your piety in private." And that is also the day where everybody's walking around with a cross on their forehead.
Yeah.
So we get the rule that seems like, because I totally get why people want to do that. It's like, look, I want to show off the fact that I'm beginning this very important step in my spiritual life. That makes sense that they want to be seen so they can be held accountable to that spiritual growth. But God's rule is, keep it under the wraps. Yeah, go, just go do that in your room. Just go do that in your room, okay?
So why don't we do that?
No idea. Again, personal choice. I don't think that Jesus would be offended that people are walking around with ash on their head. Used to be a sign of grief. And I mean, I think you could probably take almost anything out of the Sermon on the Mount. Anything on the Sermon on the Mount, I think, is completely like on its head for what we would expect.
For like the meek shall inherit the earth.
Yeah. Blessed are the poor in spirit. That doesn't sound like a blessing.
They will see God.
Turning the other cheek. Does that sound like that would be a good idea? Somebody's coming after you, somebody's trying to attack you, and what do? You let them do it?
Yeah, that one come to my
Yeah.
mind. I thought, I didn't know if that one would fit in with this or not, but
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And then in the same verse, like if they steal your cloak, give them the shirt off your back.
Mhm.
And this is kind of the foundation of John Wesley's first rule. John Wesley looked at all of these really extreme, counterintuitive statements where God's wisdom is different than human wisdom. And he started seeing kind of some patterns emerge. Also, too, like Wesley, he lived in a, like, his first appointment, because he was a Anglican priest, was in Georgia. So he heard all the time that, like, oh, slavery is good for them. And John Wesley was like, slavery is bad for them because slavery is bad. That got him in a lot of, he didn't last very long in Georgia. But he also, Industrial Revolution was also a big thing where he saw coal miners being injured. He saw people getting injured in factories all the time. And people would say, well, this is the price of progress. And he would look at all of these really radical things that Jesus said and like, no. Our first step, I don't know what is right, I don't know what is wrong, but I do know that our first step is to do no harm. Then the second step is one of the most vague ones. Again, proudest dad ever that my daughter has these memorized when my wife does not. But since she's Lutheran, she gets a break. My daughter's been a lifelong Methodist, so. But the second rule is do all the good that you can by all the ways that you can, by all the means that you can, all the times that you can, all the places you can, to all the people you can, as long as we ever can. I always pause after that last one because for the longest time, Lily got to say as long as you ever can. Now she just takes the whole thing, which I'm cool with that too. So the problem with that is all, right? How do we do all the good and all the times and all the places? Where do we spend most of our time?
At home.
At home?
Yeah.
These days.
Yeah. Hopefully these days are a little different than most days. Judy, you just got home. Where do you spend most of your time?
Or
Yeah.
Well, probably at home when I'm around here. Yeah. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, or just in general, like what eats up our time?
living in community.
A lot of driving. Of course, I feel like that even when I don't have my commute. Going anywhere, I feel like is like, oh, I'm always in the car, picking up, dropping kids off. Oh, sorry, what's that, Donna?
I would answer that I spend a lot of my time relating to work, and I spend, then when I'm not, it's time doing the routine things that you have to do to just, get through the day. Like I do have to do laundry once in a while, have to go to the grocery store, just those daily things.
Yeah.
Spend some time thinking and planning and in quiet thought, and then time with friends and family. So when I think about how I spend my time, it's in lots of different ways.
Yeah. A healthy, well-rounded person will do it like that, I think. Then maybe it's just the point of life that I'm in. I find when I have the time to do those routine things like grocery shopping or folding laundry or picking up, I find that really just peaceful. It's centering. Centering, I think, is the term I'm looking for. It helps me just find my center. And when I don't have the time to do those things, they become the world's biggest, most overwhelming task, and I hate them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I'll have to say, I think back, I just remember saying that at the time, when my mother was fighting cancer, and I had 4 kids at home trying to keep up with them. And I remember coming home. I'd been in the hospital with her for a while. I remember coming home and doing laundry, like you just said. And I remember telling Brent, I go, this feels so good because it's routine, but you're actually doing something, and it does center you. I don't know how else to describe it, but it really did. And I still think of that a lot of times when you're doing routine things. You can still think about other things. You can still pray as you're doing those things.
Bishop Job actually has a book on doing just that. Actually, change my prayer life.
Oh, really?
So what do we spend our money on?
Well, I find that during the pandemic, I've spent a lot less money.
You must not have an Amazon account.
I have an Amazon Prime, but I don't spend a lot of money.
You are far more disciplined than me and my family.
Well, I'm older than you are, Nate.
It's kind of the same answer that I gave to the first one. I spend some of my money relating to work, and some taking care of my home, and some on friends and family, and some on myself, and some on causes or things that I care about. And sometimes I think, yeah, maybe I kind of got things out of balance where I need to be, and so I have to stop and kind of correct the course.
Yeah, it's the late Billy Graham had a great line: "Give me 5 minutes with a man's checkbook, I can tell you the status of his soul."
Yeah.
He would say that if you looked at our budget, your soul has a lot of diapers and a lot of good food. That's like of the controllable expenses we have. That's that. So.
I just had a thought like that today when I came home, and I don't know why it popped into my mind, except I'd been talking to somebody earlier today who was doing a kitchen remodeling project. And so they were trying to decide between which of the latest and newest kind of countertops that they were going to put in the kitchen. And I thought, when I came home, I thought, I don't need new countertops. How can I spend that kind of money on countertops when there are people who are hungry?
Yeah.
You know, so sometimes I do get myself back to where I need to be, and sometimes no, I just spend my money.
Yeah. Right. Jesus
On
gives us
shoes,
permission for
right?
that too. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
On shoes, right, Donna?
Shoes and things that sparkle.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, there's that scene where the woman comes and pours the really expensive perfume on Jesus's head, and Judas yells at her, and Jesus says, you know, you'll always have the poor with you. You won't always have me. And that's, Jesus says that every now and then you can splurge on self-care. The fact that you would have a thought like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this, there's other important things, I think is a good start. So there's a balance there. We can't, we can all give every penny that we will ever make to the poor, and it will help specific people, but it won't help the whole systemic problem. But that intention, like as long as we look at intention, I think that's what matters. So when we pray, what do we pray about?
Family?
I find I'm usually praying about or for other people
Mhm.
or situations, and not usually for myself. And I don't do that consciously, but when you ask that question, that's just like, oh. But Benita, I'm planning on you taking care of me in your prayers, so I shouldn't have to pray for myself.
Okay, I hear you.
Yeah. This is, again, I feel like I've always had like a very weird prayer life. That's why I've read like several books on the subject. I pray for presence. I pray for connection. Wesley has this term called the blessed assurance. Like I want my heart to be like strangely warmed. I know that God knows what I'm worried about. God knows all the things that I want to talk about. But at the same time, when I come to prayer, I need that assurance that God has heard all of those things that I've thought about and worried about and stressed about throughout the day. And then I will go through and pray about it. I have a list of everybody in all the 5 congregations that in the bishop's cabinet that I always pray for. I pray through that list every day. Part of that list, not the whole list. Don't have that much time. But it's always just that connection. Like I want to feel connected. I want to feel that I'm not just writing a letter to Santa Claus for people to get better and stuff like that. Sometimes it's answered, sometimes it's not.
I mostly say thank you.
You would, Jan, you would. Is there anything that you consistently say thank you for?
Just daily things, and you know, I'm very fortunate to I'm just thankful.
When I listen to the radio and read the paper and see what we're doing in the world about the world, the physical world, and how we keep on doing things that harm the world, like, and it seems a problem that is too big for us to solve. We've gotten so far along in the you know, the CO2 in the air and all that stuff. That's something that is on my mind sometimes when I pray, and I wonder what little things we could do that we do, but it's such a big problem, and it's so interconnected, and we're not in control of what's done. You know, they want to help the farmers by giving them aid for the corn and soybeans, but they're not used for food. They're used for making gas, which we aren't going to keep
Yeah.
burning in our cars. So we're going to go to electric cars. And farmers use
Oh.
things that you could eat right here, like a garden. But I don't know if that day is gone forever, or
Yeah.
I just wonder about it,
Yeah.
where we'll get.
Oh, you're right. It's bigger than us. And that goes back to that radical foolishness of God. It's too big
Yeah.
for us, not too big for God.
Okay.
There's a book that we should do a study on sometime called the Prophet and the Wizard. I read through that when it first came out, I think 5 or 6 years ago. But it talks about all these different crises that we've had in the past, like the food crisis of the 20th century and different agricultural crises. And they talk about how every crisis there's the prophet who warns the problem, who streams from the mountaintops, who makes everybody aware of it. And the prophet always says, cut back, cut back, cut back, make sacrifice. Then you get the wizard, who is just an innovator, a brilliant person who finds a technological solution. So the mix of restraint from the prophet and advancement from the wizard creates about the Iowa guy, the World Food Prize guy.
Ken Quinn, is that who you're talking about? Oh, no.
He engineered the wheat. Begins
Yeah.
with a B. I always want to say it's Borglum.
Norman
Borlaug.
Borlaug.
Borlaug, thank you. Borlaug and this farmer union guy. They were his primary example of the wizard and the prophet. Borlaug was the wizard. The farmer union guy who talked about the food crisis was the prophet. And so those are it. Inspiration will come, or Christ will return in glory. One of those two things will happen. Either way, God will handle it. So what it comes down to, like the hard part about the first rule is we never know what harm we'll do. The hard part about the second rule is we'll never know if we're doing all the good that we can. So that's why we have the third rule, and that is maintain all the ordinances of God. Pretty simple rule, right? Bishop Job simplifies that to stay in love with God. So the grand Wesleyan argument here is that we can't know if we're doing good. We can't know if we're doing bad. So trust in the method. Trust in the dictations of the Bible and the teachings of the church. God can see things that we cannot, so walk in faith there. What parts of the faithful Christian life seem the most counterculture? If you're walking in faith, what's going to seem the weirdest to the culture we live in?
You're faithful and not pragmatic.
Yeah. Yep. I think something specific to our culture is that when I hear Marge and Virginia speak out on their environmental concerns, that's kind of against the culture of Corydon. I could definitely see how there's several people in our congregation who would say like, oh, and roll their eyes. Of course, that's not you guys are in line with the doctrine of our church, but if you speak on something passionately, that kind of goes against our culture, doesn't it? Us modest Midwesterners.
My experience with talking to farmers is they really live more or want to live more sustainably.
Yeah.
They're economically in a hard place, but
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
most of them really want to pass the land on to people that are coming after them and are decent people. So I don't see evil there. I see more caught in a hard place.
Yeah.
But we used to have, in Wayne County, we used to have a lot of small farmers.
Mhm.
And then it got big and the small farmers went broke. And it's never been the same since. And they're forced into the way they have to farm. If they want to be a farmer, they have to be big. And that's when Corydon lost a lot of families that had to move away because the farmers, they couldn't make a living because the farmers were all broke. It's, I don't know. I think a lot of the farms were bought up by people that didn't live here, and then they had somebody farm for them, and they went to the great big fields and they weren't taking care of the land. And
It's when I was writing these questions, I just got done doing my sermon outline, so you can kind of see some of like the gospel reading for this Sunday is the Jesus and the money changers, whipping over the tables and beating them and chasing them out. Don't make my Father's house a market.
yeah.
If you understand the context of that, though, in order to purchase animals for sacrifice in the temple, which is the whole point of the temple is for the sacrifice, you have to have a market system so you can purchase the things for which you can sacrifice.
Yeah.
So Jesus has this like radical, this has to happen, but you can't do it this way kind of mentality. Throughout the week, just think if you can find examples of just ways that the Christian livelihood goes against the culture, that puts you at some kind of risk, be it personal, interpersonal, financial risk being a Christian, or even, your risk for your safety if that's extreme. And what are some daily practices that will help us identify how to avoid harm and how to do good? Think of different things, different Christian practices that will help us walk down that path. Because this will kind of get us these three things and how these three things connect. Again, to kind of go over that point. Do no harm, do good. And the only way you can know if you're doing harm or doing good is by following the commandments of God. Is a simpler way of doing that. So think about how that just is very counterculture, very counterintuitive, and how that would make your life harder. Questions, thoughts, concerns on this first section? Next time, I think we can get through do no harm next time.